Today for this extensive discussion about the PERS program, but it's important, and I'm glad we're having it. Sam in Greenville, I think the main problem with PERS is the 13 check. I know people that get an astronomical 13 check. This is because they got on PERS young in life. There needs to be a limit on the amount of the 13 check. So, yeah, I think it's grossly misunderstood, honestly, Sam. I mean, still, though, the average total retirement benefit received is not out of line. It's less than $30K a year, average. So, yeah, there are some people that have these huge cost of living adjustments in the form of a big lump sum payment that have been retired for a long time. And, of course, the longer you're on the top of the ground and drawing benefits, the bigger that 13 check gets because it is based on an annual calculation of 3% compounded on your base benefit. For each year, I think it's after the age of 60 that you've been retired. So, yeah, I mean, we could certainly analyze that and criticize that cost of living adjustment structure. And by the way, I go through that in detail, again, in the article, if you guys care to read it, where I actually contrast, well, what if the cost of living adjustment were based on the cost of living, the CPI, which is the way Social Security works, which is, by the way, you heard Mr. Higgins say, that is the feature of the new tier they've proposed, would be to change the present cost of living adjustment. There's no structure. There's no doubt that has put pressure on PERS's finances. No doubt. Because you could submit that, well, when we made that change, that 3% compounded, we should have also, on a corresponding basis from an actuary perspective, increased the contribution rates to cover that. But we didn't. Not sufficient enough to cover it, which is why we have this unfunded problem. So I hear you, and I know this, Rhino, you've heard retirees talk about this, man, in the mere hint of touching that 13 check, off with your head. Is that true? And I don't blame them because they're accustomed to it. They enjoy it. They were promised it. They expect it. All that's reasonable. All of it is. So I would argue that even if there were a legal means to do that would stand the test of a lawsuit, it would be political suicide. I mean, it would. Heck, you got people saying right now, if any member that votes for this HB 1590, I'm going to work overtime to make sure they don't get reelected. And I would ask them just to calm down a little bit, that I don't think it's all that bad, honestly. I know that they're thinking the worst, and I appreciate that. That's human nature. But again, I want to point out, they would not have the power to change your benefits. Now, you certainly could make the case that it's being politicized somewhat. I maybe would suggest, well, geez, it does make sense to have some members on that board that represent the interest other than of those who do provide some of the funding, if not most of the funding, from a contribution perspective, other than just members. That makes sense to me. But honestly, I'm not sure that, to my legislature friends that support this, I'm not sure you're going to get a different set of answers. Just like me talking about the scenario with my wife. I keep asking the same question, but the answer doesn't change, and she scolds me about it, rightfully so. I think that's true here. If you're not going to touch the benefits, you got to have more money coming in. It's just simple as that. There is no alternative. Think about your household. I can't pay my bills. Well, you either better find some more income or you got to cut some expenses. No, I can't cut the expenses. You better find some more income then. It's the same dang thing. It really is that simple. Really is that simple. I do feel like the present board, should have been a little bit more vocal. I get that feeling, Rhino, that, you know what, this isn't something new. Why aren't you standing in the rotunda? Literally. Schedule a meeting yourself. Don't just rely on those legislators. I mean, it's fine to rely on them as long as they're carrying the message back and action's being taken. Clearly, that hadn't been the case for a number of years. Then I think you got to take action. You got to step in. Go find some other legislators. Find your own. Call them as a constituent. Hey, these folks sit in on these meetings, but I don't see anything happening. I want you to know this thing is in trouble. I mean, is that unreasonable?
What if that was taking place and nothing has been done?
Fair enough. That's absolutely, and I don't know. I freely admit, I don't know. But what we do know is, have you seen any bills? You seen any discussion, any deliberation since you've been doing this until this year?
No.
Me either. That's so
little, if any, at all.
Right. So I don't know where the breakdown is. I'm not suggesting that I know that. I'm not criticizing or condemning anyone. I'm just saying that, if I'd known about this and been involved in this, I feel like these were the actions I could take. But you're absolutely right. They could have been sounding the alarm, and they just say, oh, get out of here. We don't want to talk about that. That's totally plausible. Not saying we have evidence of that. It is plausible, though. It's reasonable somewhat. Folks, we're out.